Let's welcome our next speaker, who is the principal data scientist and engineer at Slido, which is our favorite company to send questions through. And he is working hard on improving the way meetings are run around the world with the help of LLMs, lots of hacky code, and a ton of technology. He called it boring, but I will allow myself to be more respectful of data warehouse. Please welcome Marek Suppa.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I believe I'm the only thing and the raffle that's between you, the last talk of today, and then the beer or something. Did I get that right? If that's the case, let's at least do this. Did you like the conference? Hands up if you like the conference. All right, pretty good. Did you like the venue? Did you like the venue? Cool. Did you drive the train? You know, over there. You're missing out, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure if it's running, but let me show you that's sort of pure dopamine that this thing can give you. Here's yours truly. I'm sorry. Here's yours truly. You know, this is some other guy from Slido. Doesn't matter. But if you are after a sort of a dopamine shot, I would go and check it out. This train over there. It's sort of you look at it and it's an an embarrassing to look at, sort of experience. But then you sit on it and you feel like a child again. So go check it out is what I would say. Cool. Well, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, ladies and gentlemen. Let me set the expectations straight. As the description said, I kind of stumbled upon this whole topic by accident, but I can give you at least a bit of a story, if nothing else. So let's try this. Let's see what building a modern warehouse would look like without breaking a bank. We saw quite a few ducks today. I'll try to sort of ask this question, like, does anyone recognize this duck? Hands up if you recognize the duck. Very cool. Does anyone know the name of the duck? I'm sorry, that was a tricky question. His name is Dux, and I sort of know because I worked at DuckDuckGo for 6 years, and in 2018 it sort of stopped for multiple reasons, and I kind of transitioned to this thing called Slido, and now the standard spiel would be, I'll tell you what the Slido is about, and this is a standard marketing copy that you would get, an industry-leading interaction platform for all types of meetings and stuff, and this is what it looks like, but then again, you've been using it for at least 2 days now, so I think you know. But the reason why I came to Slido was sort of interesting. The reason why I came was that the CEO of Slido kind of sort of reached out through a mutual friend and said, I mean, lots of text passes through Slido. How about you come and try to build some, fancy but useful machine learning NLP, features on top of it. There's a lot of value I can see how you could add if you just did, just pick the low-hanging fruit. That was interesting because that's what I was interested in academically. That's how I thought I would spend at least a couple of years of my life. So I kind of came. We agreed on some collaboration. I come on day one, and I get some accesses and stuff like that. And the first question I had, okay, so what does the data infrastructure look like over here? I was sort of 11 in the morning. And the more I asked, the more it started to look like this way. It's sort of in a sort of confused fashion. At the end of the day, I kind of had to kind of arrive at this conclusion, which is that in 2018, the Slido's data infrastructure was non-existent. Much of data reporting was in spreadsheets. But the nice thing about conferences like this is that this sort of a thing seems to be a recurring sort of event. Yesterday, we heard the very same thing about Airbnb, but it was 2010, so 8 years difference. But same thing seems to have happened. Worse things happened as well. So, for instance, there was this manual data extraction happening on Sunday. Interesting thing. I'm not sure what you do on Sundays, but there was a person here who did nothing else but went to some system, copied 4 numbers, and put it in some specific spreadsheet. Why was that? When on Monday there's this CEO report that's happening. What's the state of our business, sort of a thing. That happened obviously manually because because of reasons. And like, there were many things. I found out there was Tableau, even there were joins happening within that Tableau, which was running against the production database, obviously. So like it didn't really bring production down. And I sort of later found out the reason. There's a 15-minute timeout. So all the bigger queries sort of finished after 15 minutes, didn't get the results, but at the very least, it seems like the production was safe. And so what I found out was that this young lady, was the data warehouse of Slido in 2018. How did I know? Well, like anyhow, if anyone had the question within Slido, it turned out they direct message to her. And so like it wasn't like just any questions. It were things like there is an issue with the formula in this sheet. Would you mind like taking a look? There's this. Why is this NA in this chart that shows territories? It seems like users should always have a territory assigned, right? Like and things like that. It's perhaps my favorite. At 8:34 p.m., her local time, some things look weird in the weekly sales report. Could you give it a look? I have a meeting at 9. Sort of. That was sort of the state of the affair. And so many of these kind of standard misuses that you would find is what I found as well. It's day 2. So the end of day 1. I come on day 2, and basically this is where we arrived at. Like, it makes zero sense to do any natural language processing here. What Slido needs would be a data warehouse first and foremost. Like, I mean, without that, anything I would build here is basically for a demo at best. So it was like, all right, so like, how about you build the data organization here? To which I said, I mean, well, what's the budget? And he said, how about $500 a month? And from there on, this sort of a crazy roller coaster in my life starts. I'm not sure when you say head of data, what do you normally picture? People picture many things when you say head of something. So let me show you a couple of examples. Here's a sort of standard head of something. Head of engineering would be this, the smirk and running out of the door. Head of finance would be this, the nice suit and all that. Your numbers are square. You can only guess what the head of sales in his jovial, demeanor would tell you. And then the head of data, all he has are sort of, hands in, head in his dance. So that was sort of this picture does bring PTSD, if you're asking. It's a sort of, it's something I hoped I forgot, but this sort of a discussion, I guess it's going to serve the purpose. But I did take it in the end, and I did take it for the people there, mostly because I saw that despite all that's happening, they were still managing somehow, and so I thought there would be hope. So I'm very sorry for a bit of a false advertising, but like what we'll try to do is sort of, how do you build kind of a modern data organization, or at least just a warehouse, but like data organization without breaking a bank. I guess I should say the Slido at that point was a bootstrapped company. No outside investment except for some very early angels. And so money wasn't a thing that would be available in massive quantities, but energy and dedication and perhaps sort of enthusiasm that we couldn't find there. So here's how we went around building something like this. I'll try to take the sort of I promise this is the only boring slide I have. The platform process people approach, mostly because it seems that 3Ps might kind of fit here. And so on the platform level, one of the few things I kind of had to do straight up was like, an anonymous head of DevOps basically told me, whatever you are gonna do here, and I heard you've been hired and stuff like that, there's zero chance this affects production in any way. To which I sort of agreed, also happily. And the first thing of the first thing we got, or even for free, was to get a replica of the RDS of the production database. And so that was all that we had in the first, say, week, perhaps a few more. So the actual first order of business then would be, what sort of a warehousing solution would we pick? Remember, it's 2018. The Slido is a sort of smallish SaaS business, standing on its own, but still not very massive. So I sort of chose things that looked good to me. And I chose things like, I took a look at things like Snowflake and BigQuery and Redshift and other things. But like the first thing I did with say Snowflake was to take a look at the pricing. And when you run the pricing for something very, very small, like you run 10 sessions a day for an hour, and you run them every day of the week on small warehouse, it's basically nothing. It's already over my budget, so I don't, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't probably do much with that. So unfortunately, probably a no-go. My next nice thing that I wanted was to go to BigQuery, and I went to this to the CTO at the time, basically asked what he thought about that, and the answer I got is something you must have gotten yourself for quite a few times already in your careers, which was like, we are AWS shop. There's zero chance we are moving elsewhere, and so I was left with Redshift and Athena, and you probably see where this is going. When I was seeing that there's no option for us to go to anything sort of to save money wherever we could. Even spinning the smallest Redshift instance was out of the picture. So we ended up with Athena, and it turns out that it wasn't such a massively bad decision as it might look like. Okay, so we stand with AWS, we stand with Athena. Next thing that we'll go would be, okay, what sort of an orchestrator do we pick? Again, 2018, if you were around, you might remember some of these things, or like even from today, you might remember some of these things. And so the kind of state of the kind of lay of the land was that Luigi was a very well established piece of software. At least that's how I perceived it. Airflow was the very nice up and comer, a nice thing people talked about. And Argo was a thing that you would use if you had Kubernetes running in your infrastructure, which we didn't. So I was left with Luigi and Airflow, and the way I sort of made this sort of a decision, which it seems that you'll get to easily with me as well, was that I sort of tried to put something together in each of those, and then took a look at the code, also the code that's powering it. And I saw the hacky way in which Airflow was put together, to which I said, I'll be at home here. So we basically picked Airflow, but not because there would be some sort of massive sort of selection process going on. I basically went with something that at least looked good. I guess I should kind of stop by in here for a bit. Like, how do we do extraction from all these sources, right? You don't write it yourself, you're not crazy. Or maybe you do because you are in Central East Europe and you are a bootstrapped startup and you use things no one else knows about, things like Exponia. How many of you know Exponia? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them are Slido. Okay, so like it's like that sort of a deal. We can go with LiveAgent and Nice Reply, you get the same thing, but like that was a big part of Slido's ecosystem. And if that's the case, like I don't think there's a very big chance that you'll have you'll have someone put together an extractor that you could even pay for. So you ended up with a bunch of kind of extraction pipelines that we had to build and monitor ourselves. Also because there was quite a bit of homegrown stuff that we kind of inherited. And so what's left in here in the standard triad would be the visualization layer. And in there the options were numerous, or at least a bit more numerous. I already mentioned that there was some Tableau that I found back at Slido in 2018. The Tableau that I found was an instance that was running on Slido infrastructure. The pricing was so egregious that it cost like the salaries of 2 people, I believe, back at that time. So I was basically told that it's not going to happen. And then I was left with these 3, and in there, as you could probably assume, Metabase didn't have an Athena connector, and in between Redash and Apache Superset, seeing the code from the inside, I again found a thing that I would call home for a bit. And so we ended up in a fairly straightforward platform, as you would probably find yourself. Now the crazy thing is this money question. Like, is it even possible? Like, you're you're basically trying to run a warehouse per month on a smaller budget than a conference ticket costs here. So like, the answer to that would be that it did turn out to be sort of doable in Slido setup back in 2018. Here's what it looked like, the kind of rundown. I need to note that Athena here would also kind of contain the S3 bucket costs, and Apache Superset really was running on the smallest instance we could find at the time. At one point, I even calculated that the Apple Watch had more RAM than the server this was running on, but we survived. We'll see how that ended up. But so the answer is yes, you could run it, but you need a kind of a different sort of mental structure to survive something like this. Okay. Then on the process side, what I found in Slido was that there was an absolute onslaught of direct messages to people who were sort of doing data stuff. I guess you would find this normally, but it was sort of a surprising thing to me. And the way that this would happen was that people would kind of be even encouraged to ask people for things, not just sort of 3 people. There were 4 people in the whole data team back at that time, but it usually got to a single person who ended up being the single point of failure. So we changed that very quickly with a very simple solution, which ended up being a Slack bot. Slack is where much of the discussions within Slido happened, and so from going through direct messages, you would put /data, a nice kind of a data request form would pop up. And that kind of nearly immediately, there was a bit of getting used to it, but nearly immediately changed at least the narrative around how do we discuss stuff that needs to happen? How do I ask for something that then ends up being kind of a data problem? The nice thing in here is that it follows a standard procedure or a standard concept, which is make the invisible visible. If you see that there is a lot of stuff happening, a lot of questions being asked, a lot of data questions being asked, you sort of kind of unconsciously arrive at the position of, is this something I should ask about, or should I not really ask about? And so there was a pretty big win, pretty nice win. This is what it would kind of look like, and it's also something that survived for about 5 years now. So it's pretty nice win. The next thing was that even though there there was a kind of an understanding that we would have various amounts of DAGs running in Airflow. For the first year and a half, it was all custom. Even the transformations were totally custom, which meant that the what you would call data analysts back then would not really do much with that. There would be quite a bit of a bottleneck. So as you can imagine, we replaced all that with dbt. There were kind of issues along the way. So first of all, the issues in the previous sort of environment was that there was no staging even, as you could imagine, that then led to things like this. This guy who ended up being the CEO asked at 6 a.m. like, are there any issues? Can you please check that and things like that. It's not a thing you want to wake up to. Then we tried sort of to do documentation outside of the transformations itself. Sort of a pretty rookie mistake, but at least there was some documentation. Then ended up being pretty outdated, but it was a nice thing to start with. Not to mention massive breakage all around. So we used dbt to replace much of that. The tests and docs were a nice fit straight up. We also ended up using quite a few exposures, or utilizing exposures quite a bit. And sort of analysis were also a nice fit for some of the more extra some of the stuff that kind of even other teams at the end of the day ended up doing. The kind of bigger problem there though was that even though I assumed that this was kind of change much of what we do, it didn't. And I think the reason was, or the way I thought about it was, the reason was that many of the kind of engineering or DevOps practices that I knew from the software engineering world were not even, didn't really exist. So here are a couple that we ended up kind of building ourselves. One of them is called DBT coverage. It's a very small DBT kind of like it's a Python tool that parses the manifest files of that DBT produces, and it will let you know in the very same way something like coverage.py would tell you the coverage of your Python project, or like the directory full of Python files. DBT coverage will let you know what's your coverage of, say, tests or documentation of your DBT project. And having something like that helped us kind of change the narrative around how do we make sure that we document stuff? How do we make sure that at least some basic checks are kind of happening? It's all public. It's all open source at this point. It's also very small, as you can see in here. It's about 480 lines of code, so you can see for yourself that it doesn't do anything nasty, but it can do very interesting stuff if you have a kind of a project that's all around. That would be DBT coverage. We have another similar thing that we ended up building mostly for our own use, but it also turned out to be interesting for the community itself, which we call DBT superset lineage. And all it does is that kind of tries to answer the question: can I see the dependencies of superset dashboards directly in my sources and models? And on the other side of the pond, can I see the kind of descriptions from DBT docs directly in superset? So it tries to sort of sync up in between superset and your DBT metadata. And again, it was a smallish script that we put together so that we could work a bit more effectively. It ended up being an inspiration for the preset guys who kind of put it together to their preset CLI. So I guess what I'm trying to say with this is that we kind of saw that there were sort of things that were missing. The one that I was missing the most was a sort of linter. How do I make sure that the code that we are generating, if it's SQL, it's SQL, but like how do I make sure that across everyone who's writing it, we are on the same page? SQL fluff was something that kind of saved us quite a bit. It's fun to say that we contributed to it a bit, but it was a couple of small commits that I did. It then took off massively, and it's now a very mature piece of software, which I would very much encourage you to use if you have SQL lying around that you want to look at and see something that you can parse nicely with your own eyes. Cool. SQL fluff can do also things like these. Have it, if you put it to a pipeline, you can see for yourself where the kind of issues are, and then you can fix them fairly quickly, or at least have a discussion around them, which is what we were mostly after in here. Cool. So we had the request bot, the DBT, and the tooling on top of it. The final thing of the triad would be people. And with people, that was perhaps the most difficult part. So the first thing we tried to do was to see if we can upskill people where necessary, so that at the very least in the small data team of ours, which was a couple of people at that time, there was some common lingua franca. People were all over the place, with some of them being very technical, the others not having seen SQL in their life. I don't think I have a good solution to how to do this, but we ended up going through a Udemy course together, and it turned out to be a fairly okay-ish way of leveling the playing field. So this master SQL for data science, although there was not much of a data science happening, was a nice thing we tried on the SQL level. And on the Python level, we ended up doing automated boring stuff with Python. Every Thursday, we would sort of kind of meet for about 50-55 minutes and go through a chapter together. You would be surprised how many things you can learn this way in a smallish group, even though many of these people will never be professional programmers. They'll probably never write software that will be running on massive amount of massive amount of computers or anything like it. They still manage to get quite a bit out of it, and on the kind of many of the things you saw previously, the small commands came straight up out of here. So upskilling when necessary. The next thing was that at some point, and this is maybe 2020, maybe 2021, it kind of became obvious that the people that ended up generating all these massive SQL files and like doing a lot of modeling that even, like, if we want to call it that, using all various kind of analytical queries that many times I didn't know much about either, they were doing something that looked like engineering. And so it might have made sense to kind of, say so out loud. How I got kind of inspired to do that was when I saw this famous blog post. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it's well worth a read. An analytics engineer is really just a piece of data analyst. I was like, what an awesome definition. Like, let's say it's exactly how I pictured Daniela when I saw her there. It's not that she would be pissed off at the people wanting stuff from her, but she was pissed off at the fact that she would like to help them, but didn't have the, the desire was there, but they couldn't really help it. It's like this guy says, oftentimes an analytics engineer is really just a pissed off analyst who has the tools and motivation to make things better for everyone else. Very, very correctly so. I would subscribe to that. The tools were not really there, so we tried to put it there. The motivation was, and so it turned out that, at least to me, it looked like the analytics engineer would be a nice thing to call these people, and that Daniela would be the quintessential example of that. This guy then continues, the moment to man out DBT is palpable. The rise of analytics engineers is a real moment born out of necessity and genius branding. And that I didn't like too much. So is it just branding? Is it just, are we sort of fooling ourselves to get these people to, like, pay bands which are higher than analysts? Is that what we are doing in here? I get this was Corona times, and I was kind of pissed at other things as well. But that made me also kind of explore the depths of the internet and run into this thing. This guy is called Hillel Wayne, and he is a big name in what's called kind of safety and verification of programs. And he kind of asked the same thing. I guess pandemic kind of like brings questions out of people, and he really asked this: are we really engineers, like software engineers? Are we really engineers? The way he went around it was that he literally found people who were like chemical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical and industrial engineers, and he went and sort of asked them, like, what do you guys normally do? What do you do compared to software engineers? And he has a full video around it. I encourage you to watch it. I think the nicest sort of summary of it that I saw was from Dan Liu, who basically said he was an electrical engineer for a while, and he basically said the practices aren't fundamentally any different. So some things are better. Some things were better, like testing, formal methods, performance analysis in electrical engineering, but some were way worse, like version control. Try to version control a PCB, that sort of thing. Automation or mouse tools. And it seemed to me that like this sort of a thing could directly apply to analytics engineers as well. And so we went with that. We established it as a role, and it's been with us. It's been with us ever since. The final thing that we needed to do, and it turned out to be kind of a very natural step, was that even if we didn't want it ourselves, it seems that the future Slido was headed to was one in which everyone would need some sort of data in their work. That didn't matter if they worked at customer, call center, or whether they did sales. At the end of the day, doing some sort of data analysis is something they would need to do. And so the team kind of adapted this method, kind of a larger goal of being ready for 100 data analysts. Slido was about 150 people at that time. It's now around 250 people. And so many things started to happen just because of that, and I'll get to that in a second. So if I were to sort of tell you straight up, like what does building a data warehouse kind of without breaking a bank and Slido look like? It was these things. Very standard, very standard, very old technology, effectively, or very boring technology. Very kind of small fixes to the processes that were either non-existent or needed a bit of a push, and upskilling people where necessary or helpful, and having kind of a bold vision in which analytics engineers would make a big part. And this would be it. but it's not. And it's not because the pandemic sort of happened, and then this sort of a thing happened, and Slido got acquired, and we kind of felt that if Cisco can have Golden Gate Bridge, we have a bridge in Bratislava too. So that's the shirt I'm wearing in here, and I kind of want to give you a quick rundown of okay, so this sort of a narrative of being scrappy, does that even work when you are kind of within Cisco for I don't know, 2.5 years now? I can show you at least 3 reasons or 3 ways in which it still makes sense. For quite a bit of time, when you're acquired, you're on this honeymoon where you are the new nice thing, everyone sort of is nice to you, and then it finishes. And then you get sort of a question like, okay, we need the automatic way of getting customer data out of Slido to some very important, data loss protection and e-discovery tools. So first thing you do is you look these things up and never heard of it and things like that, and then try to sort of think of what would it what would it mean to put it together. I'm not gonna sort of bore you with how it happened, but the important part in between this picture and this picture is that we ended up needing a data API, a sort of a very thin layer on top of the massive amount of metadata we already had in DBT. And when we are building a data API, someone had the nice idea, and we called it the data pie, and that was now powering quite a few of these use cases for both internal clients and external clients. Again, all that happened, this part in here is still the same. All that happened was there's a thin, very thin API kind of a layer on top of it. Had we had time, it would have been DBT project to REST API, basically straight up. That's how it's set up. So data pie, the first thing. The other thing I would like to kind of quickly go over, mostly because I saw too many ducks today in here, is that this Athena thing obviously has massive limits, and you've seen quite a few of them yourself in here. But like the data pie, when it starts to get used seriously, we cannot really have something like that in production. It's different when we do it in the back office sort of a way. But what do we do in production? I wish I had more time to tell you this, but like I'll more about this. I'll stop with this. Look, we did end up adopting DuckDB because everyone likes ducks. The question today was very nice. We did end up also using Iceberg as well, and we do have Duckberg, ladies and gentlemen, and that's how we go about kind of powering all these queries. It's a fairly straightforward system in which we first filter for things that get sort of ingested by DuckDB, and that's a fairly scrappy but extra effective way of getting kind of a warehouse-like architecture down to something like Slido, which you would never. Oh well, who knows? We might not have thought about. And finally, the absolutely final thing is that when we talked about these DevOps things that we put together, one of the things that I was sort of always desiring was, it's all very nice, but like what I would really like would be to have kind of charts as code and dashboards as code. And I know it exists, but we are sort of stuck with Superset because I made a decision a long time ago, and I just wanted to tell you that I don't know how to cut out images is the first thing, and the other thing is that it's going to exist. We are very close to releasing that, so there will be a Terraform provider for your Superset dashboards at some point, almost certainly. And that kind of gets me through my through my bonus slides to the home take message. This is very tough for me, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really think I can give you anything that you would take home. So I'll just sort of list things that felt interesting to me. First thing is, it seems like this sort of mother duck thing that we heard about today has something to it. Is our kind of experience as well. The reason why I think so is that this is from a DBT blog post And they basically said the picture is 5% of DBT installs base has more than 5K models. So you're like, okay, those are the Netflix and whatnot. But take a look in here. So this is the more than 5%, and this is the less than 100. So like, what does that tell you? There you have at least 40% of all the DBT installs are very small projects at the end of the day. So if you are if you feel like you are putting something together and then it's a smallish thing, and like what can you get from Minerva that then runs 38,000? I don't even know how many kind of metrics. The answer is I don't think you're alone. That's what I would say. Okay, start with a small proof of concept. That's what worked very well for us. Fail fast is what worked very well for me. That's what I'm speaking in here. And then repeat, and it might help. Investment into learning always pays off is a mantra I'm happy to kind of defend for as long as I'm alive. And then this scrappiness, I believe, is valuable even when you are no longer small, even when you are part of a big corporate, because procurement can take time. And finally, I would say this: when you are building a kind of a data organization or a data warehouse even, at the end of the day, the tech part is easy. At least that's how I see it. You need to build something people want. There were very nice talks about it yesterday. I don't want to get there. But you also need to build it with people who you can trust. And in that way, I very much lucked out. And what I sort of discussed here was built by these people. I am merely a messenger here, nothing more. The reason why I'm sort of showing the picture is that Danka in here is no longer the single point of failure. I can happily report she went for a maternity leave. We survived. She got back, even with her little daughter. So with that, I would like to leave you with whatever this was. And if you happen to have questions in this other thing we also built called Slido, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Let's take a couple of questions, and we will take only a couple of questions because we're running out of time, and I'm sorry we have a raffle to attend. So, I will read them out for you. If you had the opportunity to swap one of the chosen tools for a different one tomorrow, which one would you ditch, and what would be the replacement?
I would ditch myself probably. It's what I would do for real replacement. But I think if we could do it from the ground up, we would definitely go with a different warehousing solution these days. That's a no-brainer. Alrighty.
Did you do NLP, ML on Slido data in the end? If so, what tools did you use?
We do. It's running even right now. Many and multiple. I'll happily talk about it later in here. But it's a long list to discuss in here. If we could, we would turn it on even on this event. Don't you worry. So there's some interesting stuff that's happening in Slido in that area in the end. I ended up being principal after all. I'm no longer a manager. So beautiful.
Gotcha. What are the biggest rabbit holes that you keep coming across when working with the Slido data?
That's a loaded question. It's like this. It's the standard situation of a sort of scale up that was always pivoting while kind of trying to survive. And in there, the definitions of anything are very much in flux all the time. So the reason why the kind of the data things at Slido kind of ended up working was that some sort of contracts had to be established. So it's basically that when there are no contracts, things will blow up, and that's blowing up daily still.
All right. Last but not least, what is a potential upgrade of Athena when you reach its limits?
I don't know. We'll build something ourselves. At this point, we might be, or we'll use this mother duck, and that's it. That's what ends up happening.
Alrighty, thank you so much. We reached at the bottom of the questions. Thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, and this is a small memorabilia for us. Thank you very much.